My name is Isolda Hart, and for 20 years, I've lived in the same small Ohio town where everyone knows your grocery list and your sins. By day, I work in the hospital's research wing, quiet, fluorescent-lit corridors, where the hum of machines is constant and the stakes are measured in heartbeats. By night, when the lab empties out, I slip down the block to the community theater, where I act in plays no one reviews but everyone in town sees. It's a strange balance, saving lives by day, pretending to be someone else by night. But it keeps me steady, or at least it did, until the day my work was stolen. For months, I'd been developing a minimally invasive surgical technique, a new way to navigate around scar tissue with fewer complications, fewer infections. It wasn't glamorous work, but it mattered, because patients who had been told, "We can't risk another surgery," might finally hear, "We can help you." I documented everything: notes, timestamps, raw videos of trials on cadavers. It was my life distilled into folders and drives. And then one morning, the hospital erupted in congratulations. Dr. Alan Kerr, respected surgeon, golden boy of the board, had just published groundbreaking research in the Journal of Surgical Progress. I remember standing in the break room, coffee cooling in my hand, as the head nurse waved the article at me. "Isolda, can you believe it?" Kerr cracked it. "A whole new surgical method." I read the abstract, my method, my words, even my diagrams. But the author listed was Kerr, sole author. My chest burned. I couldn't speak. Later, I cornered him in the surgical prep room. The smell of disinfectant stung the air. "Alan, what is this? This is my work?" He smiled, not guilty, not ashamed, just smug. "Isolda, you're brilliant. But brilliance without visibility is wasted. I polished your notes, made them publishable. You should thank me." "Thank you?" My voice cracked. "You stole my research." He shrugged. "Research doesn't belong to the researcher. It belongs to the institution. And right now, the institution trusts me." That line hit harder than a scalpel. He was right, at least in their eyes. I was just the background, the lab rat. He was the face, the name they wanted in print. That night, I skipped rehearsal at the theater. I sat in my kitchen, lights off, staring at the printed article on my table. My name was nowhere. Years of sweat, erased with a keystroke. And what hurt more than humiliation was betrayal. Alan knew how much this work meant, not just to me, but to the patients waiting for a second chance. I felt gutted, empty. But somewhere in that hollow space, something colder began to take root. If he thought he could bury me under his name, he'd forgotten one thing. I keep records. And I was done staying quiet. The next morning, I walked into the hospital with a smile that didn't reach my eyes. Alan Kerr was already basking in the glow. His photo was taped to the break room fridge, surrounded by congratulatory sticky notes. "So proud. Our genius surgeon." I tore one down, crumpled it in my fist. Not out of pettiness, but because it made me realize something. Alan had the spotlight, but I had something he didn't. Receipts. Every note, every time-stamped draft. Every raw file saved in redundant drives. My life's work, yes, but also my weapon. At lunch, I sat with Dr. Elaine Monroe, a cardiologist who'd been at the hospital nearly as long as me. She sipped her soup, studying me carefully. "You look like someone who's rehearsing lines," she said. I smirked. "Maybe I am, just not for the stage this time." Elaine leaned closer. "You know what he did was theft, but hospitals don't care about theft. They care about optics. If you want to fight, you'll need allies. Patients too. Remember, hospitals hate bad press more than bad science." Her words stuck. Patients. The very people Alan had erased with his ego. That night, instead of heading to rehearsal at the theater, I drove to a patient advocacy meeting at the library. Fluorescent lights, folding chairs, the faint smell of burnt coffee. Ordinary people fighting extraordinary battles. Parents of sick kids, cancer survivors, seniors who'd fought insurance denials. I listened quietly until one woman, Nora, spoke up. "Doctors talk about us like we're charts, not humans, but we remember who listens." Something lit up inside me. Afterward, I introduced myself. "I'm Isolda. I work at the hospital. Research." Her eyes softened. "Then you know how much trust means." I nodded, feeling the weight of her words. Trust? That's what Alan had broken. When I got home, I opened my laptop and began drafting FOIA requests. Formal letters to pry open data and emails the hospital thought were buried. Each keystroke felt like a scalpel, precise, cutting. But revenge isn't quick, it's layered. The next day, Alan cornered me in the hallway, his cologne thick in the air. "Isolda," he said smoothly, "you're not upset, are you? This promotion is good for the hospital, and what's good for the hospital is good for you." I held his gaze, forcing a small smile. "Of course, Alan, I wouldn't dream of standing in your way." He smirked, satisfied. He didn't see the folder in my hand, stamped, "Confidential request." What he didn't know yet was that his name was already under my scalpel. The first response came quicker than I expected. 3 days after filing the FOIA requests, a slim envelope landed in my mailbox, stamped with the hospital's seal. I slid it open with trembling hands. Inside were copies of email logs, timestamps, metadata. No content yet, but proof that messages had been sent between Alan and the publishing journal, weeks before he claimed to have finished his draft. I exhaled sharply. It wasn't the smoking gun. Not yet. But it was smoke. And where there's smoke, Maya, theater director and my closest confidant outside medicine, looked over the papers when I showed her after rehearsal. Stage makeup still smeared her cheeks. "This is like Act 1 of a tragedy," she said. "Except you're not going to be the victim this time." Her words lit a fire under me. The next evening, I returned to the patient advocacy group. The fluorescent library lights flickered overhead as I told Nora and a few others about the situation. Not every detail, but enough. He took something that wasn't his, I explained. And by doing so, he put patients second to his career. If the board doesn't see that, we have to make them. Nora's eyes flashed. "Patients will speak. You give us the words, we'll give you the voices." That night, we formed a plan. While I pursued the paper trail through FOIA and subpoenas, they would collect testimony. Patients who had been told no options left before my technique. Families who'd heard promises broken by the system. It was grassroots truth. And hospitals hate grassroots truth almost as much as they hate lawsuits. Meanwhile, Alan's star continued to rise. He strode through the corridors like he already owned them. I watched him shake hands with board members, his smile gleaming under the fluorescent lights. But I also noticed something else. Whispers. Nurses who muttered when he passed. Residents who looked down at their shoes. Cracks in the mask. Late one night, while I sat surrounded by piles of documents, an anonymous email arrived in my inbox. Subject: "You don't know me, but I've seen Kerr's drafts, and I know where the originals are." My hands froze on the keyboard. The message ended with a single line: "Meet me, tomorrow, behind the loading dock." The hospital's loading dock always smelled like rubber gloves and diesel fuel. By day, it was bustling with deliveries, boxes of sterile gowns, trays of instruments, pallets of bottled water. By night, it was deserted. I arrived just before midnight, coat pulled tight, the hum of the sodium streetlights buzzing in my ears. For a moment, I thought no one would come. Just the shadows of dumpsters and the faint drip of rain off the roof. Then I heard footsteps. A young resident emerged from the gloom, hood pulled low. I recognized him vaguely. Dr. Malik, one of Kerr's protégés. He looked around nervously. "You're Isolda Hart?" "Yes," I said carefully. "And you've seen Kerr's drafts." He nodded quickly, pulling a flash drive from his pocket. "I shouldn't be doing this, but I watched him rewrite your notes. He said it was editing for clarity, but I saw the timestamps. He backdated everything." My breath caught. "Why are you telling me this?" Malik's eyes darted to the shadows. "Because I didn't sign up to be part of a lie, and because patients deserve better." He pressed the flash drive into my hand. "This has copies of the original drafts. If you can match them against your files, you'll have proof." Before I could say another word, he slipped back into the darkness, leaving me with the weight of the drive burning in my palm. At home, I plugged it in. My heart pounded as the folders opened. Rough drafts with metadata intact, margins scrawled with my original notes, even phrases Alan hadn't bothered to change. It was mine, and now I had it back. But just as relief washed over me, my phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "Careful, Isolda. Kerr knows someone talked." I stared at the glowing screen, ice spreading through my veins. Proof was powerful, but proof made me a target. The next morning, I locked myself in my office with coffee and a stack of external hard drives. Malik's flash drive sat in the middle of my desk like a live wire. I copied the files, cross-referencing each one with my originals. Line by line, it matched. My notes, my diagrams, my phrasing. Kerr hadn't even bothered to erase the track changes that bore my initials. I had the skeleton key, but power cuts both ways. By lunchtime, I started hearing whispers in the corridors. Nurses said Malik hadn't shown up for his rotation. His locker was cleaned out, just gone. When I asked around, the answers came with shrugs and lowered voices. Transferred to another program, someone muttered. Another said, better for him to keep his head down. I knew the truth. Kerr had moved him, silenced him. That night, I sat with Maya at the community theater, script in my lap. The play was supposed to be comic, but my laughter felt hollow. Maya finally whispered, "You're not here to rehearse, are you? You're here to hide." I didn't argue because she was right, but hiding wouldn't protect me or anyone else. I pulled the folded FOIA response from my bag and laid it across the script. He's cleaning house. If Malik's gone, the next move is to make me disappear. Career, reputation, maybe more. Maya's expression hardened. Then you move faster. You have what he doesn't, timestamps, raw files. You need to put this somewhere safe, somewhere public. The thought sent a chill through me. Because once I went public, there'd be no pulling back. I drove home under a sky heavy with storm clouds, the windshield wipers fighting to keep up. My apartment door stuck for the first time in years, like the wood had swollen. When I pushed it open, a single sheet of paper lay on the kitchen counter. No footprints, no broken locks, just the note. Hart, you're out of your depth. My knees buckled. Someone had been inside. The war was no longer hidden in files and boardrooms. It had crossed into my home. The note on my counter stayed with me like a ghost. I couldn't shake the thought. Someone had keys. Someone had been inside my home, close enough to breathe my air, leave a message, and vanish. I changed the locks that morning, but locks don't keep out the kind of power Alan Kerr had. The hospital corridors felt sharper now. Every clipped footstep echoed. Every sideways glance made me wonder who had been bought, who had been warned. That afternoon, I pulled Elaine aside in the cardiology wing. She frowned when she saw the note trembling in my hand. "This isn't paranoia anymore," she said. "It's intimidation." I whispered. "Then I have to escalate. The board won't ignore me forever if I bring evidence straight to them." Elaine shook her head. "The board doesn't like scandals. They'll try to bury it." "Then I'll dig deeper," I said. "They can bury me, but I'll bury him with me." That night, I sat with Nora and 2 other advocates at the library. They spread out their testimony drafts. Families describing surgeries delayed. Patients sent home with no hope. "This isn't just your fight," Nora said. "It's ours too." I looked at their tired faces, people who had fought their own wars against bureaucracy. They weren't surgeons or researchers, but their voices carried weight hospitals feared most: public outrage. So we strategized, a dual front. I would prepare the case for the board, timestamps, drafts, raw files, while they gathered stories for the press. If one door slammed shut, another would swing wide open. Still, I felt the noose tightening. At the theater, during rehearsal, I caught sight of Alan in the back row. He wasn't there to watch the play. He was watching me. Our eyes met, and he gave the faintest smile, not warmth, a warning. My chest tightened, but I forced myself to keep acting, keep speaking lines that suddenly felt like my own story. A woman betrayed, searching for truth. Later, in the parking lot, headlights flared bright in my face as I reached my car. For a second, I thought they'd run me down. Then the engine revved and sped off, leaving the smell of gasoline and my pulse hammering. Fear was supposed to silence me. Instead, it sharpened me. If Kerr wanted a war in the shadows, then I'd drag him into the brightest light possible, the medical board hearing. The decision was made. I was going to the board. For 2 weeks straight, my apartment turned into a war room. Stacks of binders, folders labeled in red ink, USB drives lined up like ammunition. Every timestamp, every draft, every metadata entry printed and cross-checked. It wasn't just science anymore, it was a narrative. And if Alan Kerr thought he had mastered narrative, he hadn't met me prepared for battle. Maya helped after rehearsals, reading aloud the statements I drafted. "You sound like a lawyer," she teased. "I have to," I said, rubbing my eyes. The board isn't interested in truth. They're interested in what sounds undeniable. Meanwhile, the hospital hummed with Kerr's triumph. Posters announcing his upcoming keynote at a national conference were plastered in the lobby. Nurses joked about Dr. Kerr, the innovator. But I caught the strain in their laughter. Whispers still followed him. Cracks widened. One afternoon, Elaine pulled me into her office. She shut the door, lowered her voice. Alan's been pushing hard. He's already spoken to half the board members privately. He's framing you as unstable. I froze. Unstable? Elaine nodded grimly. Obsessed. Vindictive. He says you couldn't handle being passed over, so you're inventing conspiracies. I almost laughed, but the sound caught in my throat. Classic. Discredit the woman before she speaks. Elaine leaned closer. If you're going to the board, you need more than data. You need voices they can't dismiss. Patients. Advocates. I thought of Nora, of the library meetings, of the binders of testimony waiting on my desk. Yes, this wasn't just about me anymore. That night, I organized a mock hearing in the community theater. The stage lights glared as volunteers played board members, grilling me with questions. Nora stood in the back, arms crossed, nodding whenever I held steady. By the end, my voice was hoarse, but my confidence sharper. Still, as I packed up, Maya handed me her phone. On the screen was a news article. Surgeon Kerr, named to Advisory Council for State Health Policy. Alan wasn't just climbing, he was entrenching himself. And I realized then, my board case wasn't just about clearing my name. It was about detonating his entire foundation. The boardroom smelled faintly of coffee and antiseptic, as if they were trying to disguise the rot with surface polish. I sat at the long mahogany table, binder open in front of me, pages heavy with proof. Across the room, Alan Kerr leaned back in his chair, relaxed, one arm draped like he owned the place. The board members filed in, men and women in press suits, faces neutral but eyes weary. They weren't here for justice. They were here to keep the hospital's reputation intact. The chairperson, Dr. Halverson, cleared his throat. Dr. Hart, you've requested this hearing. You may present your concerns. Concerns, as if theft was a misplaced stapler. I steadied my voice. This is not a personal grievance. This is about patient safety and professional integrity. Dr. Kerr has published work under his sole name that originates from my research. I have proof. Alan gave a soft laugh, shaking his head. With all due respect, Isolda, this is embarrassing. She's a brilliant researcher, yes, but she struggles with recognition. I've tried to mentor her, but she interprets collaboration as theft. The board shifted uncomfortably. His words slid across the table like oil. I opened the binder and slid copies forward. Timestamps, drafts, metadata. This isn't interpretation, this is record. My initials, my handwriting. His edits layered on top. The files match my drives, down to the second. Silence. One board member, Dr. Patel, adjusted his glasses. Dr. Kerr, can you explain these overlaps? Alan smiled. Of course. Drafts circulate, notes are shared. I simply had the foresight to finalize them. Isolda's contributions were invaluable, but raw. I clenched my fists under the table. He was good, too good. But then Nora rose from the back row. She wasn't supposed to speak, but her voice cut through like a blade. My son was one of those raw patients. Dr. Hart's method saved him. Kerr wasn't even in the room. If you bury her, you bury every patient waiting for hope. The board erupted in murmurs. Halverson banged his gavel, demanding order. But the words had already landed. Alan's smile faltered for the first time. I leaned forward, voice steady. This isn't just about me. This is about truth. If you choose his reputation over patient lives, that decision is on record. The room was no longer still. It was tipping, and Alan knew it. His eyes locked on mine, the smugness gone, replaced by something darker, a promise. This wasn't over. The board adjourned without a verdict. They promised to review the evidence thoroughly and issue a decision within weeks. I knew what that meant, stalling, waiting for the storm to pass, hoping I'd get tired and walk away. But Alan Kerr didn't wait. The very next day, a glossy article appeared in the Ohio Medical Review. Headline: Visionary Surgeon Faces Jealous Rivals. My stomach knotted as I read the piece. It painted Alan as a pioneer under siege, unfairly targeted by bitter colleagues unwilling to share the spotlight. And me? I was reduced to a footnote, a lab researcher struggling with recognition. It was calculated, precise, a smear dressed as a profile. By lunchtime, the whispers in the hospital corridors grew louder. Residents glanced at me like I was radioactive. A nurse muttered, "She's the one trying to take down Kerr." Maya slammed the magazine down on my kitchen counter that night. He's spinning the story before it spins him. If you let him own the narrative, you're finished. I rubbed my temples. So I take it back. How? She asked. And then Nora's voice came back to me. Patience will speak. The next evening, we gathered in the community theater. Not for rehearsal this time, but for testimony. Families filled the seats, some clutching manila folders, others photos of loved ones. One by one, they spoke into the microphone we'd set up. Stories of being dismissed, of hope denied, of how my research offered them a chance Kerr never acknowledged. We filmed everything, raw, unpolished, real. By midnight, we had hours of footage. Maya leaned over the laptop, piecing it into clips. You want a counter-narrative? Here it is. Not glossy, not corporate, just truth. As I watched the faces on the screen, parents, survivors, fighters, I felt something shift. Kerr had his magazine covers, but I had an army, and tomorrow we'd go public. We uploaded the first video at dawn. No polish, no filters, just Nora sitting in a folding chair under the harsh light of the community theater, telling the story of her son's surgery. Her voice cracked, her hands trembled, but her words were steady. Dr. Hart gave us a chance. Dr. Kerr wasn't there. Within hours, the views ticked upward. Dozens, then hundreds, then thousands. Comments flooded in. Finally, someone speaking up. Hospitals need more Harts, fewer Kerrs. By nightfall, it hit 50,000 views. And then local news picked it up. A reporter stood outside the library, microphone in hand. Patient families are rallying around Dr. Isolda Hart, claiming her groundbreaking research was stolen by hospital surgeon Alan Kerr. The phrase stolen research echoed through every broadcast. My phone buzzed constantly. Messages from strangers, from old colleagues, from patients thanking me. But there were darker messages too. Liar. Attention seeker. Better watch your back. I ignored them. The tide was turning, and Kerr knew it. 2 days later, he called a press conference. I watched from my laptop as he stood at the podium, sleeves rolled up like a man of the people. These accusations are painful, he said smoothly, but false. I have dedicated my life to innovation and to see a colleague, someone I mentored, twist the truth for personal gain. It breaks my heart. He even dabbed at his eyes with a tissue. Maya muttered, Oscar-worthy. But the cameras didn't love him the way they used to. Reporters pressed hard. Dr. Kerr, what about the drafts with Dr. Hart's notes? Why haven't patients credited you directly? His smile strained, his answers faltered. That night, I opened my door to find another note slipped under the frame. This one didn't bother with words. It was a printed still from our testimony video, Nora speaking, a red X slashed across her face. My hands shook as I held it. They weren't just trying to silence me anymore. They were going after the people standing beside me. I stared at the photo of Nora, the red X slashed across her face. For the first time, I considered quitting. Not for myself, I could stomach humiliation, even danger, but for them. The people who trusted me enough to speak. At the next library meeting, Nora slammed the paper on the table. They think this will scare me, she said, voice trembling but defiant. Let them try. I put my hand over hers. You don't have to do this. I won't risk you. She looked at me sharply. Isolda, you don't get it. They've ignored patients for years. This is the first time we've been heard. If I back down now, they win twice. Her resolve hardened mine. Still, I couldn't ignore the danger. That night, I filed a police report, though I knew how little weight it carried. An officer shrugged. Could be a prank. A prank. Maya didn't call it a prank. She called it escalation. They want to rattle you, divide you. If they can break your support, they break you. So I did the opposite. I widened the circle. I reached out to more patient groups, more advocacy networks, even journalists who had been circling the story. Within days, testimonies poured in. Letters, recordings, grainy cell phone videos of people telling their truths. We set up a website, truthandcare.org. It wasn't sleek, but it was real. Stories stacked on stories, names and faces attached. No anonymity, no fear. The site exploded overnight. Not just in Ohio. Across the Midwest, patients began sharing. The hospital couldn't contain it. Neither could Kerr. But the bigger it got, the sharper the claws became. One evening, Elaine rushed into my office, pale. Isolda, your HR file's been leaked. My stomach dropped. She handed me a printout. Pages of half-truths twisted into daggers. Notes about conflicts with colleagues, emotional strain, even a notation about a leave I'd taken after my mother's death. Kerr's fingerprints were all over it. If he couldn't erase my science, he'd erase my credibility. I sat down hard, the weight of it crushing. For a moment, I saw his plan working. Me isolated, patients discredited, truth buried under paperwork. But then I thought of Nora's words. If I back down now, they win twice. I clenched my fists. No, if Kerr wanted war, I'd bring the entire community with me. The HR file leak spread fast. By morning, the hospital's internal email was buzzing with whispers. Words like unstable and difficult stuck to me like burrs. It didn't matter that most of it was false. The stain was enough. For a moment, I felt myself slipping, like maybe Kerr was right. Maybe he was untouchable, and I was just a woman shouting into the void. Then Nora showed up at my door. She held out her phone. On the screen was a video, a patient in a wheelchair, voice shaky but firm. I'm alive because of Dr. Hart's research. I don't care what their files say. She listens, she saves. Nora smiled. For every paper they leak, we'll post a face. For every smear, we'll post a story. Her words lit something fierce inside me. That night, the theater turned into a command center. Maya sat at one end of the stage, editing testimonies into bite-sized clips. Elaine arrived with a USB of her own, memos Kerr had forgotten to delete, where he'd taken credit for work he never touched. We worked through the night. By dawn, we had a package. Videos, documents, a timeline. A full counter-narrative, ready to drop. I wrote the introduction myself, staring into the theater's camera. My name is Dr. Isolda Hart. I am not unstable. I am not vindictive. I am a researcher whose work was stolen, and I am standing up because this isn't just about me. It's about every patient who deserves honesty. When we hit upload, silence filled the room, just the whir of the old projector above us. Then, slowly, notifications began to ping. Shares, comments, hashtags. By noon, it was trending. Truth and care. The tide surged back in my favor. Journalists reached out. Lawmakers tweeted. Advocacy groups demanded investigations. And for the first time, Kerr looked rattled. Elaine caught sight of him in the cafeteria, jaw clenched, smile gone. He knows he's bleeding, she said. But I knew better than to celebrate early. A cornered man doesn't surrender. He strikes. The letter arrived by courier, hand-delivered in a stiff white envelope. Inside was a cease and desist. Pages of legal jargon accusing me of defamation, irreparable harm, and intentional sabotage. At the bottom, Alan Kerr's signature gleamed like a dagger. Maya skimmed it, her jaw tightening. He's not bluffing. He's throwing the full weight of the hospital's lawyers at you. I swallowed hard. Then he's scared. But fear has teeth. By noon, rumors of a lawsuit spread through town. Patients texted me, worried. Advocates hesitated to go on camera again. The threat worked. People began to pull back. That night, I sat in Elaine's office, papers scattered across the desk. She leaned forward, eyes sharp. Listen. A lawsuit isn't about winning in court. It's about draining you. Money, energy, time. He wants you exhausted. I buried my face in my hands. I don't have endless resources. Elaine tapped the pile of testimony binders. But you have something he doesn't, the public. If you keep this fight in the shadows, you'll lose. Put it in the open, where his intimidation looks like what it is. Her words burned through the fog of panic. That weekend, we held a town hall at the theater. Folding chairs lined the stage. Reporters crammed into the aisles. I stood under the spotlight, cease and desist letter in my hand. This, I said, holding it high, is how they try to silence truth. Legal threats, smears, fear. But what they don't understand is that truth doesn't scare easily. The crowd erupted. Cheers, applause, chants of truth and care. Maya uploaded the speech. Within hours, it was everywhere. Hashtags trended again. Advocacy groups issued statements of solidarity. Even a few state legislators called for investigations into Kerr's research. The next morning, my lawyer called, voice low but electric. Isolda, brace yourself. Kerr's team just filed the suit officially. They're coming for everything. I looked at the blinking cursor on my computer screen, the evidence files open. If he wanted war in court, then court is where I'd drag the truth. And this time, the world would be watching. The courthouse smelled like old wood and disinfectant, as if history itself had been scrubbed but never fully cleaned. I sat at the plaintiff's table, my lawyer beside me, stacks of binders lined like sandbags against the storm. Across the aisle, Kerr looked every inch the respectable surgeon, polished suit, practiced smile, eyes like scalpels. The judge entered, robes flowing, voice stern. Case of Kerr versus Hart, allegations of defamation and damages, opening statements. Kerr's lawyer rose first, smooth, deliberate. This case is not about innovation or patience. It is about one individual, unable to accept her colleague's success, waging a campaign of lies to destroy him. Dr. Kerr is the victim of malicious intent. Every word was acid. Then my lawyer stood. This case is about truth. We will show with evidence that Dr. Hart's research was stolen, her name erased, and when she spoke, she was met with threats and intimidation. The only malicious intent here is from Dr. Kerr, who fears accountability. I watched the jury, faces blank, guarded, hard to read, too soon to know who believed what. The first week was brutal. Kerr's lawyers attacked relentlessly. They painted me as unstable, obsessed, a woman scorned by recognition. They waved my leaked HR file like a flag. It cut deep, but I refused to flinch. Every time they twisted a half-truth, my lawyer countered with timestamps, drafts, testimony. Piece by piece, we laid the puzzle bare. On the third day, Elaine took the stand. She looked the jury straight in the eye. I've worked with Dr. Hart for nearly 20 years. She's meticulous, honest. And I personally saw Dr. Kerr present her research as his own. Murmurs rippled through the courtroom. Kerr's jaw tightened. But the real blow came from the video. Maya queued it up. Testimony after testimony. Patient after patient. Their voices echoing through the chamber. Nora's face filled the screen, her words steady. Dr. Hart saved my son. Dr. Kerr wasn't even there. The silence that followed was heavy, electric. For once, Kerr had no smile. But as court recessed, he leaned close as we passed in the hallway, his voice low, venomous. You think the jury will save you? They're mine. Always have been. Chills ran down my spine. Because I couldn't tell if it was just bravado, or a warning that the system was already stacked against me. The trial dragged into its third week. Each day felt like a battle in a war of attrition. Kerr's lawyers paraded experts who praised him, dismissed me, and danced around the evidence. My team countered with witnesses, documents, and timelines. The jury stayed stone-faced, unreadable. I was exhausted. Nights blurred into mornings. Coffee replaced meals. My eyes burned from rereading the same drafts again and again, afraid I'd miss something that could tip the scale. Then came the moment that nearly broke me. Kerr took the stand. He spoke with polished sincerity, weaving a story of mentorship, collaboration, and heartbreak. I saw promise in Dr. Hart, he said, voice trembling just enough to sound human. I never wanted this fight, but I cannot let her lies undermine years of work that could save lives. He dabbed his eyes with a handkerchief. The courtroom was silent. Even the jury leaned in. I felt the ground tilt. For a moment, I thought, maybe this is it. Maybe no matter how much truth I hold, the performance wins. But then Maya squeezed my shoulder. Don't give him the stage, she whispered. Take it back. That night, back at the theater, I replayed Kerr's testimony over and over. He was rehearsed, calculated. A man who knew the system favored performance. And then it hit me. If this was theater, then I knew the stage better than him. The next morning, I asked my lawyer to call me as a witness. When I sat down, I didn't start with charts or jargon. I started with a story. My mother died in this very hospital, I said softly. She trusted doctors who promised care and gave excuses. That's why I became a researcher. That's why I refused to accept impossible, because patients aren't problems to be solved. They're people. I watched the jury shift. Then I laid out the evidence, not as data points, but as chapters, my notes, my diagrams, my files. Each piece part of a story that ended with Kerr's theft. And when Nora's testimony video played again, I didn't look at the screen. I looked at the jury. This isn't about a title or a line in a journal. It's about whose voice you trust. A man who steals or the patients who lived? The silence that followed was different this time. It felt like the balance was shifting. But as the gavel struck recess, Kerr leaned close once more, his whisper like poison. You think you've turned them? Wait until you see what I have left. The next morning, the courtroom buzzed with tension. Kerr's lawyers shuffled papers like magicians preparing a trick. When the judge called the session to order, Kerr's lead attorney stood, a gleam in his eyes. Your Honor, the defense would like to introduce new evidence regarding Dr. Hart's credibility. My lawyer stiffened. Objection. This wasn't disclosed in discovery. The judge frowned. Proceed with caution. Show us what you have. They rolled out a projector. On the screen appeared emails, dozens of them. Messages supposedly written by me, dripping with bitterness, accusing colleagues of conspiracies, even suggesting I wanted Kerr ruined at any cost. My stomach dropped. They're forgeries, I whispered. But to the jury, they looked real. Dates, signatures, all polished. The attorney smiled like a hunter. Ladies and gentlemen, this is not the voice of a truth seeker. This is the voice of obsession, of vengeance. The jury shifted uneasily. Maya gripped my arm, whispering, "Don't crack, not here." Elaine leaned forward, lips tight. Isolda, those headers, they're sloppy. Look at the IP addresses. They don't match hospital servers. I stared harder. She was right. They were fake, but convincingly fake. My lawyer rose. These documents should be struck. We will demonstrate technical inconsistencies, including metadata that points to external tampering. The judge allowed the evidence, for now. The blow landed. Whispers swept the gallery. That night, in the empty theater, I collapsed into a chair, staring at the flickering stage lights. They'll believe the lies before they believe the truth, I muttered. Maya crouched beside me. Then make the lies collapse. Show them what only you can prove. And then I remembered Malik's flash drive. The original drafts, metadata untouched. Not just timestamps, but IP addresses, edits, author IDs. If Kerr wanted to weaponize fake emails, I'd cut deeper. I'd show the jury exactly where his fraud began. Line by line, bite by bite. The stage wasn't lost. The climax was still coming. When court resumed, the air was thicker than before, like everyone expected blood. Kerr's lawyers strutted, smug after their forged emails had shaken the jury. They thought the script was theirs. But I had rewritten the ending. My lawyer rose. Your Honor, we would like to introduce rebuttal evidence. Original drafts, preserved with full metadata, provided prior to this trial. The judge nodded. Proceed. I walked to the witness stand. Malik's flash drive clutched in my hand like a relic. We projected the files onto the courtroom screen. Page 1, my handwriting in the margins. Timestamp, 6 months before Kerr claimed authorship. Page 2, author ID stamped with my initials. Page 3, an IP address traced not to Kerr's office, but to mine. The courtroom was silent except for the clicking of the projector. I leaned toward the jury. This isn't just text. Metadata is the fingerprint of research. You can fake words. You can't fake the machine that recorded them. One juror nodded, just barely, but I caught it. A crack in the wall. Kerr's lawyer objected, tried to confuse the room with jargon. But Elaine took the stand next, her voice steady. I reviewed these drafts. I saw them written in real time. Dr. Hart didn't just conceive this method. She lived it. Then Maya cued the final blow. Side-by-side comparison. My original draft on the left, Kerr's published version on the right. Identical, down to typos he'd never corrected. Gasps filled the room. The jury leaned forward, eyes locked. For the first time, Alan Kerr looked small. His jaw clenched, sweat beading at his temple. But when recess was called, he brushed past me, muttering under his breath. You think this wins you the war? You still don't understand who I own. I didn't flinch, not this time. Because the truth was no longer mine alone. It was in the hands of everyone watching. The courthouse was electric. Word had spread about the side-by-side drafts, and by the next morning, cameras lined the steps outside. Reporters jostled for sound bites. Is this the end for Dr. Kerr? Will Dr. Hart be vindicated? Inside, the tension felt like static. Kerr's mask was slipping, but he wasn't finished. His lawyers pulled their final move, character assassination. They paraded old colleagues who claimed I was difficult, that I hoarded data, that I was incapable of collaboration. Each word chipped away at me. I kept my eyes on the jury, refusing to blink. Then came the twist. Kerr himself produced a new witness, a hospital administrator. She claimed she had personally reviewed drafts with his edits long before I'd submitted mine. It was a lie, but it was delivered with calm authority. The jury leaned in, doubt returned. My lawyer rose, cross-examining sharply. Where are these drafts now? The administrator hesitated, misplaced. The courtroom buzzed. A ghost document. Convenient. Maya whispered at my side. He's grasping. They've got nothing left. But desperation can still sway hearts. So I stood. My voice trembled at first, but steadied. Ladies and gentlemen, this isn't about whether I'm likable. It's about evidence. You've seen the drafts. You've seen the metadata. You've seen patients who lived because of the research I fought for. That doesn't vanish because someone calls me difficult. I felt the words hang in the air like a weight. For once, the jury didn't look at Kerr. They looked at me. Alan shifted in his seat, restless. Sweat darkened his collar. The gavel struck. Closing statements tomorrow. As the courtroom emptied, Alan passed me again, his whisper raw now, stripped of charm. You'll regret this, Hart. If I go down, I'm taking everything with me. I didn't respond, because the truth was. Tomorrow it wouldn't be his stage anymore. The courtroom was packed for closing statements. Reporters lined the back wall. Patients filled the benches. Even the judge seemed to sense the gravity, his gavel striking with a sharper crack. Kerr's lawyer went first. He paced smoothly, his voice like velvet. Ladies and gentlemen, do not be distracted by theatrics. What matters is credibility. Dr. Kerr has a record of saving lives. Dr. Hart? She has a record of conflict, of bitterness, of blaming others. Ask yourselves, who truly serves patients? The man who builds or the woman who destroys? Each word dripped poison. The jury sat still, unreadable. Then it was my turn. I stood slowly, feeling every eye in the room. My hands shook for a moment until I thought of Nora, of Malik, of every patient who had looked me in the eye and said, "Thank you for listening." I set my notes down. I didn't need them. This case isn't about who smiles more in court, I began. It isn't about who has friends in high places. It's about evidence, about truth, and about people who can't afford for medicine to be corrupted by theft and ego. I clicked the projector one last time. The screen lit up with two documents, my original draft and Kerr's published version. Identical, side by side. Look at them, not rumors, not opinions, facts, my work, stolen. Then I paused, letting the silence stretch. And even if you don't care about me, think of the patients. Think of the woman in the wheelchair who said, "I'm alive because of this research." Think of her son. Think of every life touched by what Kerr tried to bury. My voice broke, not with weakness, but with conviction. This is not destruction. This is survival. This is truth. I stepped back. The jury's eyes followed me, not him. The judge's gavel struck. Jury will deliberate. As the courtroom emptied, Alan leaned across the aisle, his whisper hoarse. "They'll never side with you. You're dreaming." But for the first time, I believed my dream was stronger than his lie. The jury was out for hours. The courthouse halls filled with whispers, reporters scribbling notes, patients clutching each other's hands. Every second stretched like a year. I sat alone on a bench, palms pressed together, staring at the floor. I thought of my mother, of Nora, of Malik, of every patient who would never know my name, but who had been the reason I never gave up. When the bailiff finally called, "Jury has reached a verdict," my chest tightened so hard I could barely breathe. We filed back into the courtroom. The judge asked the foreperson to rise. On the matter of Kerr versus Hart, allegations of defamation and damages, how does the jury find? The pause was endless. Then, "We find in favor of Dr. Isolda Hart." The words rang like a bell. My body went weak with relief. I gripped the table, tears filling my eyes. The gallery erupted. Patients cheered. Reporters rushed out to file stories. Nora sobbed openly. Even Elaine, stoic as stone, let out a shaky breath. Across the aisle, Alan Kerr sat frozen, his smile gone, his power evaporating before everyone's eyes. This judge struck the gavel. "This court is adjourned." I stood, the weight of years lifting from my shoulders. Reporters surged, cameras flashing, questions shouted. But I raised my hands, asking for silence. "This was never just my fight," I said, voice steady despite the tears. "It was for every patient who trusts that care means honesty, for every researcher who knows the cost of being erased. Today, the truth won." Outside, the crowd was waiting. Signs read "Truth and Care." Hashtags trended again. For once, I didn't feel small. I didn't feel erased. I felt whole. Kerr's threats, his whispers, his lies, they couldn't survive the light of truth. And as the sun dipped low over the Ohio courthouse, I finally let myself believe what I'd fought so long to prove. That truth, when defended with enough courage, outlives every lie.